All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a hidden, systemic architecture, one that bridges medieval statecraft directly with today's financial systems. We're essentially tracing an invisible line, right from the absolute power of medieval kings straight into the modern family court system. It's what we're calling the architecture of extraction. And honestly, it's a fascinating, if slightly terrifying, synthesis of history, law, and taxation that really reveals how these systems are perfectly designed to harvest wealth.
We have to start with a pretty stark reality, one that touches millions of people. We're asking a genuinely difficult question here. Why does the legal unwinding of a marriage so often result in the sheer devastation of a family's financial estate? I mean, you've probably seen it happen, right? A couple splits up, and by the time the dust finally settles, their savings are totally gone, the house is sold, and the retirement accounts are completely depleted. Why is this utter obliteration of wealth basically a standard feature of the entire process?
Well, there's this incredibly visceral metaphor from our sources that just hits the nail on the head. Quote, fattening the pig. The idea is that the state actually incentivizes couples to herd and fatten all their wealth into a single, highly vulnerable pen, only for the state and its systems to basically slaughter it at the end. It's a profound, kind of chilling realization, right? The system essentially plans for the breakdown.
Section 1. Fattening the modern pig. The divorce industrial complex. So how does this modern extraction actually work in practice? The absolute crucial point to understand here is that the standard legal model operates entirely on billable hours. And this structure, whether inadvertently or perhaps perfectly by design, heavily incentivizes prolonged disputes. Think about it for a second. When lawyers are getting paid by the hour, an adversarial process packed with endless discovery requests and manufactured pretrial motions is naturally going to generate massive, massive fees. We've seen a shift away from fault-based protections toward no-fault frameworks, sure, but the system definitely kept the adversarial combat. It basically escalates emotional conflict over every minor detail, effectively draining the marital estate dry just to harvest those fees.
The reality we're looking at is that these no-fault frameworks, when you combine them with adversarial proceedings, have effectively turned relationship breakdowns into a highly profitable, industrialized machine. It's really no longer just about resolving a family dispute. It's become a highly specialized industry entirely built to profit from the fracture itself.
Section 2. Medieval Machiavellian annulments, the blueprint.
Now, to truly understand this modern extraction, we actually have to pull the rug out and look backward. Because believe it or not, this isn't some modern glitch. It's actually a perfected blueprint straight out of medieval statecraft. Going all the way back to 1066, when the Norman conquest established the crown land monopoly, which literally meant the king owned absolutely everything, monarchs routinely weaponized marital dissolutions to manage power. Look at the timeline. In 875, Lothar II tried to annul his marriage using totally fabricated witchcraft accusations. In 1193, Philip II literally imprisoned his bride the morning after the wedding just to force a split. And of course, you know the big one. In the 1530s, Henry VIII famously weaponized annulments to control his succession and seize vast, vast amounts of property.
But how did they actually do it legally? Enter the consanguinity loophole. So this was a highly complex church prohibition against marrying relatives. And since basically all aristocrats were distantly related back then, the crown could very conveniently discover this loophole whenever they needed a legal pretext to retroactively void a politically inconvenient marriage. An annulment didn't just end a marriage, right? It declared it entirely void from the very beginning. This retroactively turned legitimate heirs into bastards, which made it incredibly easy to break up rival noble factions and permanently strip those heirs of their inheritance rights.
And when an annulment wasn't quite enough to neutralize a threat, the crown unleashed a much blunter instrument, the Bill of Attainder. This was essentially a legislative act that declared a person guilty of treason without even bothering with a formal trial. The Tudor crown absolutely loved utilizing this to dismantle political rivals and confiscate their massive family estates. I mean, it was famously used against Thomas Cromwell himself in 1540. It allowed the state to basically bypass the courts entirely and just seize wealth directly.
The ultimate goal of all these brutal tactics was something known as a corruption of blood. This was a legal concept that completely severed the link between ancestor and heir. So by legally corrupting the bloodline, the state just eliminated the rightful heirs altogether. This ensured that massive territories and family estates were forfeited directly back into the crown's treasury. Really, you can think of it like a medieval corporate takeover, just executed entirely through the destruction of the family unit.
Now, when we put these two eras side by side, a pretty chilling reflection emerges. The historical monarch's deliberate fracturing of unified territories
perfectly mirrors how today's system violently strips away concentrated pools of family wealth. Medieval crown despotism relied on consanguinity loopholes, estate seizures, and corruption of blood, right? Well, the modern state apparatus simply swapped those tools out for no-fault frameworks, escalating billable hours, forced liquidations, and tax cliffs. The sovereign king absorbing noble lands has basically just evolved into the legal and tax industry absorbing modern family equity.
Section 3. The inescapable chevron Shears, the modern state.
So, moving into the mechanics of the modern era, that despotic crown has simply been replaced by the tax code and the legal cartel. The tax code, represented by institutions like the IRS, is the ultimate catalyst here. It absolutely does not just passively sit back and watch a divorce happen. Instead, it actively provides these high-stakes, highly time-sensitive tax incentives that severely pressure couples into aggressive, complex restructuring. This pressure is exactly what forces the family estate right into the waiting arms of the legal and financial industry. Take the real estate trap, for example. Right now, the tax code allows married couples to exclude up to $500,000 of capital gains profit on a home sale. But the second you divorce, that cliff sharply drops down to just $250,000 per person. If a couple owns a highly appreciated home and they mismanage the timing of the sale even slightly, they stand to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS literally overnight. They are quite literally being herded toward a massive financial cliff. And to avoid falling off those financial cliffs, couples inevitably run headfirst into the IRS Section 1041 basis trap. What this does is create this total illusion of tax-free transfers between divorcing spouses. But in reality, it secretly shifts massive, hidden capital gains burdens from one spouse directly onto the other. To safely navigate this minefield, couples are forced to hire a small army of specialized attorneys, forensic appraisers, and tax professionals to draft these incredibly complex transfers. So the sheer fear of the tax penalty directly feeds the industry.
And hey, it doesn't just stop at real estate. Even trying to divide a private retirement account or a pension requires feeding the machine. The IRS legally mandates a highly specific order called a QDRO, or Qualified Domestic Relations Order, and guess what? That requires incredibly specialized legal drafting fees. So you have legal and actuarially professionals effectively just skimming their cut right off the very top of those divided assets.
When you zoom out and look at this entire process collectively, this brilliant, sharp, chevron stack motif really emerges. You can think of these steps like the downward blades of the state shears, just systematically slicing away the family's assets. First, you have step 1, the tax hit, which brings forced liquidations and those tricky basis traps. Then, step 2, the billable hours, which just grinds down wealth through adversarial motions and discovery. And finally, step 3, the QRoto skim, harvesting specialized fees directly out of retirement accounts. It is a highly engineered, stacked, completely sequential extraction.
Section 4. The protected cartel.
So, you might be wondering, who actually protects this system of extraction? How on earth does it persist? Well, it survives through self-regulation. The system maintains its incredible financial hygiene by intentionally ensuring constant friction and ambiguity. I mean, just notice how the bar essentially investigates its own members. But perhaps the most telling part is their active rejection of efficiency. If modern innovations like immutable smart contracts or automated asset division threaten to make dispute resolution cheap and lightning fast, the bar actively resists them. Because a clean, automated process, that leaves absolutely nothing for the system to harvest. And because state actors like judges and prosecutors enjoy judicial immunity, they can comfortably facilitate the absolute financial slaughter of these family estates without ever being touched by the very tort system they unleash on the general public. They are totally, legally insulated from the real-world consequences of the prolonged, insanely expensive adversarial process they preside over.
Ultimately, after tracing this entire architecture of extraction all the way from medieval kings down to our modern tax codes, we were left with a seriously provocative question. When we look at the totally shattered finances of a modern family post-divorce, are we really just seeing the exact same Machiavellian statecraft that Henry VIII used, just perfectly rebranded for the modern age and conveniently hidden behind the totally mundane paperwork of hourly billing? It's definitely a heavy thought to carry the next time you look at the sheer complexities of family law. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and definitely never stop questioning the structures around you.